basically been playing around a lot with Stable Diffusion, XL, and LoRa training. So I thought, oh, I'll give a demo of my memes. I don't know. So everyone always does that. A little bit about me. No one ever cares about the person actually giving the talk. Basically, it's just an excuse for me to sort of say that my LinkedIn photo for the last ages is not me. It's my LoRa of me, which you can see, like you can tell there because it's an earlier version of my LoRa, but I thought that was kind of cool. Piper, who you can see on the desk there, is asleep behind the monitor, so I can't show her off during the talk either. So yeah, platform engineer. I'm the Digio brand at Mental, soon to be Mental brand. No sort of AI ML experience in the background, terrible at math, all that sort of stuff. So there's a bit of a disclaimer, I think, that comes with it, and that, yeah, this really isn't talk, it's more a fever dream, I think. I don't know AI ML. I'm certainly not an artist, as you will see, as you can see. And I'm just really just a dude that's been playing around with text generation for years, but I guess like image generation for the last maybe 2 years or something like that. So yeah, I'll probably use incorrect terminology. Feel free to type a comment in on what I should be using. I definitely will have unwarranted confidence, and there'll be some likeness to individuals, which is purely coincidental for legal reasons. I'll be glossing over a few things, and yeah, standard disclaimer. All right, so things I'm going to just sort of zip over tools-wise is I'm going to talk about SDXL, so Stable Diffusion Extra Large, I'm assuming XL stands for. I reckon they should have gone for just SD Extra, but that's cool. Koya, or Koya, I should say. I always say Koya for some reason. Koya SS, which is basically a GUI, or it's like a nice wrapper to set you up with your LoRa training. Just can do quite a few things. And Invoke AI, which I really like personally. It's there's lots of tools you can use, like automatic ones, I guess, to generate images, but I quite like Invoke because it's very low level. So I'll sort of take you for a very, very quick look at that. So what is a LoRa? I'm assuming most of you in this talk probably know, but if you don't, basically it's the icing on the cake of a model. So sort of an efficient training method that sort of often, you grab a model and you train a LoRa to give it that bit of flavor, and that could be like a theme or a concept. So line art, Gothic architecture, characters from Batman films, whatever, black and white photography, black and white analog photography, Canon EOS 30D photography. People create some really specific LoRa's, like really strangely specific LoRa's. Yeah, it's quite a community. And just look at this magnificent beast. I mean, how good would Nick Cage be as Superman? So you can let your wildest dreams unfurl when you're creating LoRa's. There's this cool graphic that someone else linked to, I think, in a previous talk on LoRa's. I'm not going to go through it because no one likes reading through slides. But basically, a LoRa is like the lightest, quickest way, I think it's the quickest way to train a concept or subject. So concept, like I was saying before, black and white analog photography. Subject, I'm going to do through here. I'll show you what I've done with a model of myself. I'm really sick of looking at myself in photos now, but it's a bit hard to sort of get someone else's permission to do a whole talk on making a digital version of themselves. Yeah, it's not complicated to use. Behind the scenes, no, I'm just getting to know the parameters and knobs I've got to turn. There's a really vibrant communities of LoRa creators, as there is model creators. One thing I would say, definitely, particularly if right now you've got another tab open, you're looking up websites and stuff, for the love of God, if you're on a work machine, keep the not suitable for work filter on. There's lots of interesting things that, hey, good on those people, but yeah, that's not, yes, anyway. So yeah, LoRa, basically example of LoRa without, an image without a LoRa and an image with. So on the left, no LoRa. but you know, a sort of relatively detailed SDXL image. And on the right, the exact same generation, but with adding a LoRA of myself in there. So if I kind of look that way, kind of looks like me, get better dress sense, I think. So that's the aim, really, is to kind of like, how do we go from this hideous eyeless beast on the left to, hey, that's myself. Did you ask my permission? So there's a couple of sort of schools of thought about how to start creating a LoRA from your sample data. So as you might have guessed, you need photos of yourself. I was going to say lots, but you don't actually need that many of yourself, or in this case, myself. There's two schools of thought. One is that you want to create a word, a pairing that the model, the AI, knows is you, so is the subject. And there's two ways you can do that. You can create a unique, you know, gobbledygook sort of AZGFHK, which means nothing, and it will learn that as being you. Or there's this other school of thought, which I've been using more, which I think is better, and that is to find someone famous that SDXL, Stable Diffusion, knows. So it's a character or a term that SDXL is aware of that looks, not necessarily look like you, that other people would think you look like, but that computers think you look like. So if you upload your image to, you know, this website here is quite handy. What's it called? Star by Face. And it kind of goes, which celebrity do you look like? So you can do that. There's also some reverse tools for SDXL. Actually, might not be XL, but 1.5 at least. So in this one here, I've uploaded a photo of myself, and it says, okay, you look like these guys. The one on the left looks like either a famous chess player or terrorist, and I just didn't feel comfortable with that. But also, they've got glasses, and that's weird. And Aaron Paul's really cool. I don't think I really look like him in real life, but computers think I look 31% like him. So I kind of like went, okay, that's probably an all right starting point. What you probably want to avoid is someone that's really, really overtrained. So that might be the most attractive celebrities of the day. So whether it's I don't know what, whoever people find really super attractive, there's probably creepy people on the internet that have overtrained models on those people. So yeah, I've kind of avoided that. Not that I look like any of them. So yeah, there's a couple of websites. I've got links in the docs which we'll give afterwards. So you can kind of go, when you find someone that you look like, you've got to verify that SDXL knows who that person is. So you'll just type into a few different, you can use hosted ones, SDXL tools, and type in the name of that famous person and make sure that it does have a rough idea of that person, so that you've kind of got a consistent keyword and that starting place for your model to build from. You can see that it knows Aaron Paul. I think this is actually a good model to use because it knows him, but it's also got him really wrong. Like, that man's forehead is not that big. Like, I'm fairly sure that, yeah, he looks way more normal than he does in SDXL, which to me is kind of good because it means you can kind of take it a bit further. So when you're looking at what images to add in to your training data sets, which I'll get into in a second, really diverse images. So, you know, outdoors, indoors, different lighting, really important. You only have one subject. So if it's a person, one person in it, otherwise it'll get confused and mess up the model. But the most important thing beyond all else that I've found is don't include even one image that's slightly blurry. You're better off just not including it at all and getting really sharp images. So try and avoid like the selfie camera, you know, the lower resolution camera, any shots with like where you're moving. It's really important to have that really sharp edge like defined around you. In this example here, I've actually got, it's pretty bad with the black t-shirts, way too many black t-shirts. Or dark blue t-shirts in this. So ideally, I'd, you know, in a few different situations, maybe I'd be wearing a hat if I wore hats, and I'd be standing outside in nature or sitting down, whatever. Just really want that diversity where it's clearly you, but in different situations. And minimum resolution 1024 by 1024. Which is a pretty easy ask with modern cameras and cell phones and things. I usually go 1536 or 2048. I don't know why I do. I just was like, nah, more is better and it doesn't seem to cause problems. So There's people debating whether that's a good thing to do or not online, just like there is people debating whether to crop images to to a square. Everything that SDXL really generates is a square. So I was like, I'll just crop it all to a square. It's very easy. Cool website, bulkimagecrop.com. It doesn't seem ad laden. Obviously, don't put anything that's private documents or I don't know, shower photos or something weird, whatever the hell you're training. Don't put it on there because it's on the internet. But it's really quick. It just like resizes and crops everything for you really easily. And I use that a whole bunch when creating different LoRAs so far. Then there's this thing which was really new to me, which is regularization images. So you're really aiming to get a large number, like quite a large number of images of the same type of thing that you're training, but not the same thing. So the class, they call it, I don't know if it's actually the correct term, but certainly with this kind of training, it is. The class is person for me. So that's, a human person biases towards male for some reason in SDXL, at least 1.0. So I needed a whole heap of photos of just one male person, preferably male person, through, I know, like somewhere between 500 and 2,000 images or so. Thankfully, there's lots of data sets online, varying quality and varying licenses. So some of them you can't use for training AI specifically. So of course you wouldn't. And you want to make sure there's not more than one subject in there. It is preferable if they're sharp, kind of clear images, but it doesn't matter nearly as much. At the end of the day, these regularization images are to help the model understand what kind of thing you're talking about. Like, what's the context? What's the object that you're talking about? Not how does it look? It doesn't go into how it looks. It also helps with these images here. It helps your model be more flexible. So if you don't include these, you don't have to. You might find that some facial expressions aren't quite as natural when you generate them. So having quite a diverse training set is useful there. You can find the training sets, obviously you can search online. I'm sure you're all capable of that. But some of the good ones like this one here, the FFHQ, I believe its license says you can't use it to make AI models smarter, but I believe someone was arguing this, that a LoRA for purely for regularization images is permitted within the license. Read deeper on this. Yeah, there's a whole heap of good sources. Captioning. This is another cool thing. So you've got all your images that you want to use as your reference, your photo of yourself, or your 10, 15 photos of yourself, or your photos of your cat or your dinosaur or whatever you've got. This is again optional, but definitely recommended to help the model, the AI training, I guess, with the training of your model and understanding what's in the image. It really does help to add captions to each image. And the caption is just a text file, plain text file, that is the same name as the image. So if the top one there, IMG 1409, you'd create a text file called IMG 1409.text or anything really, as long as you configure it right. In there, you want to be concise but descriptive. So for me, I've picked the person Aaron Paul and the kind of class that I am as person. So I'm going to add those in there. So Aaron Paul person, put the age in there because I don't know, it can be useful, particularly if you want to age yourself or the subject later on. You want to describe maybe what they're wearing or where they are, and any defining features. So in this case, I put tattoos on arms and stuff like that. There's a couple of really good external resources for sort of captioning theory. I put a link to them because they're quite wordy and they take a bit to sort of understand, but I think they explain them better than I could. So may as well give them credit. Yeah, that's that. So we want to caption all the images, and you might go, well, okay, you've got 15 or 20 images that you need to caption. Do I really have to write out text files for all of this? And what about the, let's say, 2,000 regularization? Because they're much better if they're captioned as well. So you can kind of do a bit of inception and use AI to caption your images. And then if you want to refine that caption, you can do that. Surprisingly, it does work. I think it's because it's a different model that does the captioning from the model that you're training. So it's, it's designed to caption images. So to do that, this is where I'm kind of going to bring up the topic of Koya. So Koya itself is a person. So there's a person from Japan who wrote a whole heap of nice training wrapper around it. It's not in English. So a community kind of got together and started to translate a bunch of it. And Koya SS is one sort of bundle of a lot of those scripts. It's a, what do they call those? Can't remember the name of the Python web framework. Gradio web front end, like you see everywhere in the generative AI sort of space at the moment. It's pretty good. It's flexible and it's got utilities as well as sort of generators and helpers. You can run it as like a Docker container. You can run it in Google Colab. You can there's a couple of hosted services like RunPod or is it Run Diffusion? I think Run Diffusion also have one where they spin this up. It seems to be the sort of standard for SDXL at least. So with that in mind, you can use Koya to caption your images. So it's got this cool little tool under utilities, captioning, and then I did blip captioning because that's what I saw of someone else. I think it was a YouTube clip I watched or something, and they were using it, and it seemed to work quite well. So can definitely recommend that it's good. Basically, you just put your source images directory in, and remember to update your extension to whatever text file extension you added on there. So I just used text. And it's really important to add the prefix to the caption for your images of the LoRA or the subject you're training. So Aaron Paul, comma, person. I add a comma because after in the caption, after it says Aaron Paul person, that's when it will add the blip caption, which is where it might say sitting on a red park bench eating an ice cream. I leave all the other things just as defaults so far. That seems to be okay. When you click caption images there, it's going to go away and it's going to create all those text files for you in that same directory. You can do exactly the same with the regularization images, but don't worry about adding a prefix. If you are going to add a prefix, you could just put person, comma, so that the topic's kind of correctly set or the class is correctly set. With your ones, with the captions you've created, I definitely recommend just opening the text files, having a quick skim through and adding any extra detail you want to add. The thing is, once you've done it once on your subject, you'll never have to do it again. So, a couple of minutes extra, it's sort of worth it for the quality, I think. Then it's got basically you get onto LoRA training here, and I was saying before, there's a couple of different types of sort of fine-tuning or training and things you can do, Dream Booth and TI and LoRA. So it's not so self-explanatory in Koya, but there are quite a few good tutorials. So I've sort of figured it out from 2 or 3 different tutorials. People have strong opinions about certain things and they all seem to clash. So take the average, take it all with a grain of salt. But basically start with dataset preparation, which is a utility or a tool within here. And all this is doing is it's sort of building the scaffolding for the training that you're going to do. So you've got all your images of your subject in a directory. You've got your regularization images in another directory. You're going to provide that here along with your instance prompt, class prompt, and number of repeats, which we'll get to in a second. And when you do prepare training data, what it does is it goes and generates correct folder structure, which all the scripts expect it to be in, copies your images, your source images into those directories with the correct sort of metadata set up, and I think creates a few JSON files as well, I think, for some parameters. One of them is the repeats. So when you're doing your training, there's the old thing of like, how much training do you do before you say, oh, that set is a model? So how you chunk it up is sort of repeats and epochs. So By default, it does 40 repeats. Most people seem to agree that dropping it down to 20 is sufficient for training an individual person. Basically, it means the number of epochs you're going to have within that many repeats. So if you increase this to 40, you're going to end up with twice as many models at the end. You might have a potentially slightly higher trained models at the end of that list, but chances are once you get over about 20 with a decent epoch, the model can be overtrained, which I'll get into in a little bit. So you run this. More parameters. Yeah, this is interesting. So training batch size by default, I don't think is 1. So if you're just training an individual person, set that to 1. It's really important. Epoch is how long is the training going to run before it generates a completed model, if you will. So a saved tensors file. I think by default it's 10. I up it to 14 because I've seen some gains, which I'll show you in a graph in a bit towards the end of that training. Max train steps is just that. And no matter what you set the epoch or the batch size to, sorry, the number of repeats, training repeats you do, how many steps maximum is it going to do? How many individual steps? Varies wildly, sort of, I think like 7,000 or 8,000 to about 10,000. Some people seem to do. Again, there's a risk of overtraining a model, which I'll get to in a bit, but it sort of means that your model becomes less dynamic, so it's a bit more rigid. Things like any expressions you haven't included in your source images might be harder to form. It may not blend as well with other subjects or other topics, and it may not lend itself to different artistic styles. So there's sort of like a medium ground where you don't have too much loss, so you haven't lost too much information, but you're sort of still flexible with how you use it. Really, really important thing, which lots of people forget, is to update the captioning extension on the right-hand side, again, from what we said before. I think there's a lot of room for improvement in the UI for this. To be honest, like I've used the UI quite a few times and I'm quite used to it, but I also do just take the command that it generates, because it's literally just a command generator. And I bookmark that, and if I wanted to run it again, I'd probably just edit the command, which I'll show you in a minute. More parameters. I know this is getting boring because it all looks the same. Really important things is you set the precision. So if you've got like a RTX 2000 series or newer, you want to go BF16. Anything prior to that, FP16. Cache latents, you definitely want to set. Learning rate's one of those things that's really up for debate. So some people, so I guess the learning rate is almost like how quickly does it change its, how quickly does it change its parameters or move on as it, reinforces the model as it's learning. So the default for SDXL, I believe some people say it's 0.0004. I set it to 0.0035, and sometimes I've set it to, once I've kind of like dialed in my settings quite nice, I've dropped it down to like 2 or 1 even. And there are a few important settings on the side, like the optimizer extra args, that you really have to include with SDXL. I've got links to why you have to include them in this. It's just too boring to discuss in a demo. Really important thing, SDXL resolution 1024 by 1024. By default, it's 512, and you don't want that. Oh God, more parameters. Basically the same. There's more like SDXL specific parameters. One cool thing you can do is you can enable samples. So every number of steps. So before I said that, I think in this example I gave a maximum steps of 9,000 and an epoch of 14. So you could say every 1,000 steps, even if it isn't finished the model, so it's the epoch, generate an image as a sample. You definitely shouldn't assume that that's how good it's going to be at that point, because it's just a sample size of 1. I don't think you can actually increase the number of samples taken with this tool, maybe on the command line. That can kind of be useful because you can kind of go, well, model 7 just has no clue, doesn't look right. And that aligns with the loss that you see from generation. Yeah. And then you can go and run training, basically. It's pretty simple from there on. You go start training. I like pressing that little print training command, which out to the console just outputs the whole single command line that you can run without using the GUI at all. And you can also use that if you want to generate this from your own APIs, or you want to write your own code to do the generation or generate the code that does the generation. So it sort of kicks off, and it will tell you, the first thing it will tell you before it even starts is how many steps it will run through. The more regularization images you include, the longer it will take. And the number of images that you've got, longer it takes. There's a multiplication formula basically for the number of epochs times the number of images, and then you times that by 2 if you're adding regularization images. So it does start to blow out. On a RTX 3090, which is what I'm running it on, you can get a pretty good LoRa within, say, 40 minutes to 3 hours. Seems to be the sort of sweet spot, depending on how well you've dialed it in your images. So yeah, So it begins, it starts, does all this stuff, it burns up your power bill. You can see the RTX 3090 is pulling like 350 watts, like for that 3 hours. So, have it in a room that maybe you're not sitting right next to the machine, it's going to be cooking, and it's going to start outputting. You see little remnants of Japanese throughout the console, which is kind of cool. When it starts, it goes off and it downloads any tokenizer models that it might need based on your settings, and then you get some nice monitoring output. So Koya comes with TensorBoard configuration like built in, so you can click the little button that says Start TensorBoard, and it pops out a URL. You can jump on there, you can have a look at the loss. I think without boring you too much, basically, I try and aim for a loss no greater than 0.01. That seems to be sweet. Maybe go a little bit higher, but I think that's pretty good. I think the lowest I've got to is like 0.07 or something like that. Basically, as I said there, the TLDR, Caveman Grug say, line go down is good, line go up is bad. And you shouldn't assume that just because it's further along the training, as you can see there, that I guess the loss is less. Sometimes it's not the very last checkpoint or epoch that you train that is the lowest loss. I've certainly multiple times when I've had too many or too much training going on, it might be back 1 or 2. So if I've done, say, 14 epoch or 10 epoch, it will be 8 or 10 instead. And you get a nice little browser of, which epoch has the least amount of loss and things there, which is pretty cool. You also get it on the console, so if you don't want to run up TensorBoard or you're running it somewhere where you can't bring up a web interface, you sort of get it the checkpoints as you go. You can see down the bottom there. And then you get your LoRa. So it generates a whole heap of safe tensor files depending on how many checkpoints you've got. So in this one here, which is an older example, it's done 40 checkpoints, and that's resulted in that many safe tensor files. So each one of those safe tensor is an entire complete LoRa by itself. Like, you could take any one and use it with SDXL to generate your subject or theme. The loss on each one is how you know which one's, usually how you know which one's the best. So I tend to like have a little look at the output and see which step has the lowest amount of loss, and then I use that safe tensor. But a lot of people, and to be honest, it's fine, you can just try each one, just go try the exact same seed, type in, Aaron Paul person eating an ice cream, and try it with each of the things to see which one kind of works best for you. Even if it's the most accurate, it might not be what you want. So onto sort of what you can get out of it, which is kind of cool. So Invoke AI, as I mentioned earlier, is the tool that I use for generating images and for editing images, sort of editing images. Doing generative edits on images is probably the best way to put it. I like it because it's quite low level. It's very raw. So if you use Midjourney or what are the other ones? DALL-E or whatever, right? They flavor the output in a way that it makes it pretty easy to get a really good quality output, which is awesome for 90% of the use cases. What they don't give you is as much flexibility or extensibility. So if you're looking to play with generating your own models and you're wanting to kind of introduce, say, multiple LoRa's, it becomes a lot easier when using a tool like Invoke AI. It's sort of like the Photoshop compared to, say, the photo app, if that makes sense. So in this example here, actually, I've got a LoRa of myself, not a very good one, a kind of earlier one. And I've also included a LoRa that I didn't make, that had a whole heap of like cinema sort of directors and things in it. So I put in one for the Blade Runner films, which was pretty cool. And then so it kind of started to get the concept of Blade Runner being quite dark and brooding and kind of like rainy neo-noir sort of look to it. I really like how the raindrops presenting themselves in this. There's no editing to that after generation. That's like one-shot generation. And yeah, so that's pretty cool. So you can kind of combine them together. You can find as many LoRa's as you like, as many LoRa's as you have RAM for. So yeah, there's a whole heap of awesome stuff you can do with Invoke AI. It's 100% free, open source. It works really, really well. There's also a cloud or a SaaS offering as well. If you don't have gear at home, you can just go and pay a monthly fee. It's quite reasonable too. It might be like $10, $12 US or something a month for unlimited generations. Does SDXL. It's got the advanced workflow, a bit like if you've got Comfy, if you've used Comfy with Automatic 1111, which is what you have JSON defined workflows and pipes of piping tools and workflows together, which is really nice. It's the only tool I've found that has this concept of a what do they call that workflow editor? There's like a unified dashboard, I think it's called, or unified canvas. That's the one, where you can combine multiple images together and do in painting and out painting, and sort of like mask part of an image and just paint that. And it's quite quick to do it, so you can kind of iterate upon your ideas pretty quickly. You can attach things like control nets or IP or text inversion adapters to them. It's really easy. Like you kind of have your libraries, you can sort of see in the top right up there. There's me and Tay up there. Of course, it's real, of course. Hunting for crocodiles, you can easily drag that into the T2I adapter, and your next image that you generate will base itself on whatever control adapter you've assigned. It doesn't have like an extensions or a plugins framework like Automatic 1111 has, but it does support completely standard control nets, IP adapters, and T2I. So yeah, the only real downsides, I think, like I've mentioned a couple of things there. The two that get me is that at present there's no mobile app, and sometimes I'm sort of thinking, I go, oh, that'd be a good idea, and I go to generate it and I try to load the page, and it's just like it's not responsive, and it's not designed with that in mind. They are like working on next minor release, I think it is, or 2 minor releases away. They're looking at making it responsive. So that'll be good. That'll be really good. There's a few little hacks to work around that at the moment. The other one is that the typical Python problem of, I don't know if it's the global interpreter lock, but the UI does seem to get thread locked if you're doing too many things at once. So it's really good at queuing and it's really performant. But if you're, say, detecting which new LoRa's or models you've installed into Invoke AI and you're generating, it's going to have a hard time. It's just going to sit there, waiting. So I think there's some non-parallelized processes in there that could be optimized. So trying it out with different styles, I've had quite good success, lots of failures. Like, to be clear, these are cherry picked. I generated these, almost all of them yesterday, I think it was. But these are definitely cherry picked because you do end up with crap, just like you do without a LoRa, right? So dialing things in is obviously part of the fun. But I've tried all sorts of different poses and things. I've sort of selected models that are a bit more flexible than others. It's pretty good. It works pretty well. And you can combine it with other models like this. That one up the top with the Muppet is an interesting one. So that's a LoRa that does like a felt or plushy version of whatever you've got. Combined with your LoRa, you can get little plushies of yourself. Silly one of me on a motorbike there. And World War II, so it does like the camera styles pretty well. Doesn't look exactly like me, but it's a start. So all of those are one shot, not like multiple iterations trying to improve it. it can go really wrong, really wrong. I've seen some really weird, like nightmare fuel weirdness. Eyes, like suddenly I have cataracts or I have a third eye or whatever. All sorts of stuff can cause it. Sometimes overtraining. So when you've done too many iterations and if you have the training strength, sorry, if you have the model strength set up too high when you're generating something, it takes your model too literally. And so it kind of like bends the universe, which should be similar to reality, into glitchy nightmares. It's really common, really common, like the whole 3-arm thing. Yeah. So good examples of under and overtraining here. So here's like a really undertrained model, that top left one. So you can see it's like, well, it's got the same beard as me, same kind of hair-ish, kind of. And it's beautifully composed, the image itself, but it doesn't look like me. It's not correct. In the middle here, it's massively overtrained. So the face doesn't lend itself to naturally, I guess, like adapting to the situation that it's in. The turkey is ridiculous. I love that. This one on the top right, like, I don't know what I entered for that, but like, I didn't enter, I don't know, Aaron Paul person, Russian meth head or something like that, because that's what that looked like to me. That's crazy. That's like full on, like, can I wash your windows sort of stuff. Down the bottom, you've got someone that doesn't look even remotely like me, despite having the same settings as lots of these other generations, and an eye which somewhere where it shouldn't. You've got this sort of pirate, and for context, I was trying to do eating dessert in the desert, just to kind of trip up the models, and it did pretty well until I hit this fella. What else we got here? So yeah, where do you run it? So run pods are a really common one. That's like where a lot of people run if they don't have running it at home. They've got kind of 2 cloud offerings or SaaS offerings. One is their one, which is kind of like a secure, you know, destroyed after you finish using it, so that instance. Another one is a community one. You basically rent time, or you rent a VM on someone's machine. So if you're not doing anything that needs a lot of security, which you probably shouldn't be anyway, you can go and rent people's machines really cheap. So you can get pretty powerful GPUs by the minute or by the hour. Replicate, obviously, SaaS cloud offering, and you can go spend your Bezos bucks and go buy an expensive graphics card. Yeah. For SDXL, you need, so for 1024 by 1024, you probably want like 14 to 20. I've seen some people manage to do it on like a 10 gig graphics card, but I think they're probably sacrificing a bit of quality at that point. If you're just looking for SD 1.5, so 512 images, 4 to 12. Someone managed to get it going on a Raspberry Pi the other day, but it took like 70 hours or something like that just to generate like one really small thing. So that's the thing. And there's lots of Google Colab stuff, but if you're going to do training with the Google Colab ones, you really need to pay for the increased GPUs and things. I started out with I got this from a data center, so it's a Tesla. It's an old Tesla P100. They're available quite cheap on eBay, and if you're willing to 3D print your own adapter and chuck a massive turbo on it, you can come away with quite a good bang for buck card. But then you start to get the itch of like, oh, I need more VRAM, give me more RAM, and you want more. So I managed to find an RTX 3090 cheap, cheap for an RTX 3090 on eBay. So they pop up for about like $800 to $900 at the moment, I think. And that gives you 24 gigs, and that's perfect. That's really, really good. That'll also mean that if you do text models, you can easily do 34 billion parameter models, and 70 if you share it with your CPU RAM. And yeah, that's a big long ranty talk. So yeah, lots of models you can check out. Do keep the not suitable for work filter on if you're going on Civet. Have fun generating some Rick Astley's like I've got down there with his fax machine, and some Tay-Tays. I mean, that photo is totally real. Of course, we went alligator hunting. Yeah, I've got like lots of links in this, which I'll share a link to this this export, and I can answer questions. Well, you can ask questions, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to answer all of them. If you want any technical, like, machine learning answers. Someone else in this forum is probably a better place to answer them. Yeah. Any questions?
Awesome presentation. Well done. Can I buy your RTX 3090 for?
No, but I've got two P100s here. If anyone wants them, one's a 16, one's a 12 gig.
What about you selling your Voodoo 316 meg VGA, man?
I was really hoping someone would notice that. Harking back to the old days. Yeah, I don't think you'd be able to train much on that.
Pixel art, maybe 16 by 16 pixels. I think Harish was asking if the LoRa's are dependent on the base model. I think the answer to that would be yes.
Yeah. And also another trick, actually, that's a good, I should add a slide into that actually. So they depend on the base model. But of course, if you've got a base model like Stable Diffusion 2 1.0, and you've had another model that's been fine-tuned, like a fine-tuned version of that, like is it Realistic Vision and those ones that are commonly used to generate humans. I think in theory, your LoRa can attach to it. Don't know quality-wise how it will work. Something you've got to be aware of is if you train your LoRa with a specific VAE, you probably don't want to attach that VAE when you generate your images later on because it's kind of baked into the LoRa. That seems to be the way I found it anyway. Suddenly I didn't need it anymore. So that seems to be a side effect of it.
Is this the process you use to generate your positively disturbing profile picture?
Yeah, no, actually, no. So that's another couple of tools. So for video, it's quite a different process, and I used a tool that's mainly used for videoing. I'm sure someone here will know of ROOP, R-O-O-P. It's from the folks that wrote that, but it's another model. If you look up Face Fusion, one word. That's one of the tools, or one part of the tools, that does very quick face swapping and on video and images. Yeah, you need a bit of grunt to run that if you want to do it on videos.
Have you done much stuff with control nets or similar type of stuff?
Yeah, I've been playing. Look, I don't know if I'm doing the right things with it. As I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just throwing stuff out there. So you saw on that. I saw your post a while ago, actually, Simon, about using the golden ratio or the golden circle to overlay and get nice composition in images. So I've played a lot with that. I really like TI adapters as well, because you can, or IP adapters are probably better. So IP adapters, you can kind of take the concept of an image and feed it in without doing a control net style generation where it generates an image that looks like the same object. Because control nets, you've got different adapters, so you can do depth or edge mapping or color tone mapping and stuff like that, which is awesome. But you may not want it to necessarily look like it, but you might want the theme. So you might attach a neo-noir image or a shot from Sin City or something like that as a adapter, and then generate your images quite differently. So that, yeah, they're really cool, and it works really well with Invoke as well. Just chain them all up.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, because I think the next generation of stuff that seems to be coming out is the sort of the DALL-E 3 type stuff, which seems to be sort of more compositional, as in giving you much more control over how what's actually in the image. So I guess it'll be interesting to see where Stable Diffusion goes with that, because
Stable Diffusion is the model, right? But the model's only one part of it. The tool that you're using to generate it is a huge part. So how it does tiling, for example, and how it does its blending, and if you're doing in painting and out painting, how it values different aspects of the image and stuff, it's all configurable, but not all tools let you configure it.
Yeah. How have you found with Stable Diffusion the control over what's in the image, aside from obviously you as a person?
Yeah, I've been really impressed, much more so with SDXL than SD 1.5. SD 1.5, I'd go back to DALL-E quite often. It just there's some things that were irking me about it, like unnatural lighting and stuff like that. Whereas in SDXL, once you get kind of used to it and you got the parameters down pat, you can generate stuff that's like gorgeous, like really, really, really pretty. But if you want to go advanced and you want to do more than just like a one shot, you know, to type a prompt and get an image out, you want to kind of go, okay, I'm going to type an image which is going to do the backdrop, and then like I might add a dinosaur in or whatever, and you want to do a bit of in painting. You've got tons of power there, and I've been quite impressed. Usually when it goes bad, it's me. Like I've like gone, oh shit, whoops, I forgot to scale it to 1024 or something like that. Yeah, whereas like DALL-E's going to make that way easier for you because it sort of takes away some of the controls. Like I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's just a different thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you get less flexibility with more out of the box power, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Oh,
Yeah.
more out of the box niceness. Like they've kind of like, yeah, they've set a lot of nice defaults for your average person and what they're doing.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Thanks for having me rant. It's probably
No,
the
it was awesome.
screenshots of the Koya are pretty boring, but if I don't include them, it's like someone's going to look at this and go, what the hell do I set these millions of settings to? And well, that works for me. Yeah, and if anyone wants a LoRA made of them, I'm happy to do it if you provide source images.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to give you that power.
There's enough images of you out there already. That's the scary thing, right?
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
On Mantle Slack in various forms already as well.
Yeah.
The last one.
Use it for good. Don't use it for evil. I mean, I don't think I need to say that to any of the people here, but don't be a dick. Don't be, you know, because there's people out there that, well, it's the internet, isn't it? You know?
Yeah. It's crazy how scarily good it's getting at generating stuff, and that's where the interesting stuff's going to be. It's always going to be someone. Awesome. Any other
Thank you
questions?
once again to Sam. Any last minute questions before I stop the recording? But really excellent. I know you said it sounded like a rant. Well, it would sound like a rant, but I think it was very well put together. You've clearly spent a huge amount of time playing around with this. So thank you.